Welcome to Truth Behind History. The stories are real, the impact is lasting. Today's video asks a bold question. Does the military actually keep us safe, or has centralized defense quietly made the world more dangerous, both abroad and at home? To begin answering that, we need to go back to a moment when the world had just emerged from global catastrophe. The year was 1961. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a five-star general turned president, stood before the American people and gave a farewell address unlike any before it. In it, he warned of a rising threat, not from abroad, but from within. He called it the military-industrial complex. His message? That the growing entanglement of government, military leadership, and defense contractors posed a danger to liberty and policy alike. In short, he saw that war was becoming profitable. And when war becomes a business, peace becomes bad for business. This was no paranoid fantasy. After World War II, America's defense strategy underwent a major transformation. Instead of focusing on protecting the homeland, it began projecting power outward, far outward. The mission shifted from defense to interventionism. And once the Cold War kicked off, that shift accelerated. The Soviet threat gave Washington a permanent justification to expand militarily, year after year, administration after administration. Under the banner of containment, military budgets ballooned and foreign entanglements multiplied. And then came the bases, hundreds of them, sprouting up all over the globe. From Germany to Japan, from the Persian Gulf to Central America. A permanent global military presence wasn't just accepted, it became expected. Intervention became the norm, a standing army without a standing war. But here's the deeper question: when defense becomes institutionalized, when it becomes a permanent industry, does it still serve its original purpose, or does it begin to create the very threats it claims to eliminate? That's what we're going to explore, one war, one policy, one consequence at a time. Let's turn now to Vietnam, the war that brought the empire into America's living room. In the early 1960s, US leaders framed the conflict in Vietnam through a chillingly simple metaphor, the domino theory. The idea was that if one country in Southeast Asia fell to communism, the rest would follow, toppling one after the other like a line of dominoes. So, the logic went, America had to intervene, not to defend its own shores, but to prevent an idea from spreading. But here's the catch: there was no clear definition of victory, no endpoint, no measure for success. What began as military advisors quickly escalated into a full-scale war under multiple presidents: Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, all expanding operations while avoiding accountability. This wasn't defense. It was escalation without strategy, a bureaucratic machine marching forward without knowing where it was going. And the cost? Devastating. More than 2 million Vietnamese civilians died, many from airstrikes and bombing campaigns that blanketed the countryside. Villages were erased, families shattered. The war did not just target enemy combatants, it consumed entire regions. And for the soldiers sent to fight, the damage didn't end when they came home. Many returned with invisible wounds, PTSD, drug addiction, broken relationships. Thousands became homeless, abandoned by the very system that sent them to war. This was the first American war broadcast on television. And as the images of burning villages, napalm victims, and body bags filled the screen, something began to shift. The public started to ask, what are we really fighting for? Who is this keeping safe? Vietnam wasn't just a military failure, it was a spiritual one. And it raised a question the empire has struggled to answer ever since. If Vietnam was the first televised war, Iraq became the first high-definition deception. In the early 2000s, the American public was told with grave certainty that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, and that Saddam Hussein had links to terrorism. These claims weren't just exaggerated, they were false, and yet, they became the foundation for a full-scale invasion. It was a textbook case of manufactured consent. Public fear was stoked, intelligence was cherry-picked, and the war was sold like a product, complete with a marketing campaign, slogans, and color-coded threat levels. But what happened after the invasion? Iraq didn't become a beacon of democracy. It unraveled. The power vacuum triggered a brutal insurgency. Sectarian violence exploded. Civil war followed. And in the chaos, a new threat emerged: ISIS, a group more radical and violent than anything the region had seen before. Meanwhile, the financial cost was staggering. Over $2 trillion spent. But here's the twist. While the American taxpayer bore the burden, private firms like Halliburton profited handsomely. Infrastructure contracts, oil deals, security services, the war economy boomed for the well-connected. And the human toll? Nearly 9 million Iraqis displaced, cities reduced to rubble, generations scarred by trauma, instability, and the loss of homeland. So, what began under false pretenses didn't just fail to bring peace. It destabilized an entire region and created conditions for even greater chaos. Which raises a painful but necessary question: was this really about defense, or was it about something else entirely? Next, we arrive at the longest war in American history, Afghanistan. It began in 2001, framed as a direct response to the attacks of September 11th. The mission was clear, or at least, it was supposed to be. Dismantle al-Qaeda, remove the Taliban, prevent future terror attacks. But as the years dragged on, the mission changed. Then it changed again and again. Nation building, democracy promotion, counterinsurgency, strategic withdrawal, counterterrorism. The goalposts kept moving, and nobody seemed to know when, or how, the war would actually end. In the end, it lasted over 20 years. 20 years. $2.3 trillion spent. Thousands of lives lost. And what was the result? Within weeks of the final US withdrawal in 2021, the Taliban, yes, the very group that American forces had spent 2 decades fighting, swept back into power almost effortlessly. The Afghan government, propped up by foreign aid and riddled with corruption, collapsed like a house of cards. You might ask, where did all that money go? Well, some of it went to ghost soldiers, troops who existed only on paper but still collected pay. Some went to inflated contracts, expensive equipment that broke down or disappeared, and shady deals with warlords. Oversight was minimal, waste was massive, and amid all this, the people of Afghanistan suffered, especially women, who saw hard-won rights vanish overnight. Schools were closed. Fear returned. The humanitarian regression was swift and brutal. Afghanistan wasn't just a failed war. It became a mirror, reflecting the hollowness of a system that wages war without knowing why, and withdraws without knowing how. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the cycle. Time and time again, we're told that US military interventions are about liberation, about helping people, about stopping bad guys. And yet, what often follows isn't freedom, it's chaos. Here's how the cycle works. First, the US identifies a threat, sometimes real, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes entirely invented. Then comes the intervention, boots on the ground, bombs from the sky, or sanctions that strangle economies. The regime is toppled, the system destabilized, and power is up for grabs. But what fills the vacuum? Usually, it's not peace. It's insurgency, civil war, extremist groups. The instability that follows creates new enemies, sometimes even worse than the ones that were removed. And then, the cycle begins again. Another threat, another intervention, another promise to fix the damage that was just caused. This is what's called blowback. It's when the unintended consequences of a military action come back to haunt the very country that initiated it. The CIA once supported a young fighter named Osama bin Laden in the 1980s to fight the Soviets. Decades later, that same man orchestrated one of the deadliest attacks on American soil. More recently, ISIS emerged directly from the power vacuum left in Iraq. It didn't exist before the invasion. It was born from the rubble. And this cycle doesn't just affect foreign nations, it comes home, too. Civil liberties erode. Surveillance expands. Militarized policing becomes normalized. The very tools used abroad start to reshape domestic life, bit by bit. So, ask yourself, if every war creates the next one, and every enemy is a product of the last, then what exactly is being defended? All right. We've seen the pattern, but now let's ask a different question. What's the alternative? Is it even possible to protect a nation without maintaining a sprawling, centralized war machine? Well, some countries have tried. Take Switzerland, for example. It has no empire, no global bases, no overseas wars. But what it does have is a population trained in self-defense, a policy of strict neutrality, and a decentralized system that prioritizes local readiness over foreign entanglements. And somehow, despite being in the heart of Europe, Switzerland hasn't been invaded in centuries. Then there's the idea of community-based security, local defense units, volunteer militias, decentralized preparedness. These systems can protect people without turning war into a business. And here's something else worth thinking about. Technology. We now live in an age where defense can be smart, not just strong. Drones, satellites, cybersecurity. These tools can deter threats without massive troop deployments, but only if they're used for actual defense, not global policing. And let's not forget trade. Countries that trade together tend not to bomb each other. Economic interdependence can serve as a far stronger deterrent than a fleet of warships. Peace treaties, cultural exchanges, diplomacy, none of these are flashy, but they've prevented more wars than any fighter jet ever has. The point is, there are alternatives. They just don't funnel billions to defense contractors. They don't consolidate power into the hands of a few. And they don't manufacture threats to justify their own existence. The choice isn't between war and weakness. It's between empire and sovereignty, between coercion and cooperation. Let's end with a question that cuts to the core. Who really benefits from war? We're told it's about safety, about protecting freedom. But look closely. Who gains when bombs drop and budgets soar? It's not the average citizen. It's not the soldier on the ground. And it's certainly not the civilians caught in the crossfire. It's the contractors, the consultants, the lobbyists. It's the firms whose stocks rise every time a missile is launched. It's the institutions that grow more powerful when fear grows louder. And yet, we're expected to believe that this is all for our own good, that endless war is just the price of peace. But is it? Because here's the truth: real safety doesn't come from global domination. It comes from stability, from trust, from systems that reward peace rather than provoke conflict. War creates winners, yes, but they're almost never the people fighting it. So maybe the question isn't, does the military keep us safe? Maybe the real question is, safe for who? Thanks for watching Truth Behind History. If you found this video thought-provoking, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you want to dive deeper into the forgotten truths of our past, check out my book History They Tried to Erase. The link is in the description. We've got more eye-opening history content on the channel, so explore the playlist and see the world through a different lens. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep questioning the stories we're told.